The Havoc's mercy sounded like it was always one wrong button away from self-destructing. Every corridor groaned like a constipated whale. Every panel flickered with a ghost of functionality, and the AI, known affectionately among the crew as Murder Grandma, had developed the habit of reading out passive-aggressive life advice at 3 a.m. over the intercom. Lieutenant Van Keller adjusted the straps of his engineering vest and squinted at a hydraulic conduit that had clearly given up on life. "You see," he muttered to the pipe, "this is what happens when you let your existential dread leak into your plasma regulation valves." The pipe, stoic as ever, responded by spraying him with steam. "Noted," he coughed, wiping his goggles. "I'll lower the sarcasm." The maintenance bay was mostly empty, save for a low-humming cleaning drone named Squeeble, who had once tried to vacuum a junior officer's prosthetic leg. Since then, Squeeble had been unofficially demoted to emotional support Roomba, and now followed Van around like a burnt toast-scented puppy. The door hissed open behind him, and suddenly the temperature dropped 15 degrees in attitude alone. Zerixa Veltal didn't walk. She moved like a gravitational certainty, measured, deadly, and fully capable of removing your limbs while lecturing you about posture. She was tall, lean, and terrifying, her armor bristling with weapon nodes and ceremonial scar insignias etched into its plates. In the ears, long, blade-like, twitching subtly as though scanning for any nearby excuse to initiate combat. Her gaze swept the bay like a scanning array configured for disappointment. "Lieutenant Keller," she said, voice like polished stone being ground under boot. "This is a restricted maintenance corridor." "And yet," Van said, gesturing dramatically at the broken pipe, "here I am, heroically preventing catastrophic plumbing-based doom." She stared at him, not in the "I'm interested in this odd, self-deprecating human" way, but more like she was calculating the fewest number of strikes it would take to turn him into paste. "I have no patience for inefficient technicians," she said. "Well, that makes two of us," Van replied, glancing at Squeeble. "This guy's been on strike ever since someone programmed him with anxiety." Squeeble beeped in what might have been robotic indignation and bumped gently into Zarix's boot. She didn't react. "Commander Velthal," came a voice from her wristcom. "You're needed at the strategic briefing in 20 minutes. Location: Conference Dome, B7. "Understood," she said, then turned back to Van. "Try not to break anything that hasn't already betrayed its function." "Ah," Van said. "You do care." She didn't smile. She didn't even blink. She just walked out, leaving the scent of ionized steel and the vague sense that the temperature had once again returned to bearable levels. He exhaled. "Yup. She's either going to kill me or adopt me as some kind of sentient stress ball." The briefing room was full of war, not literal battle, but the kind of stoic, cold planning that made battle seem inevitable. Commanders sat around a circular table that pulsed with live holographics, drifting maps, targeting patterns, and blinking red threats on a galactic scale. Zerixa stood still as a monolith at the edge of the projection, flanked by her second-in-command, a jittery Thalkiri officer who twitched every time someone coughed. Van, uninvited but inexplicably present thanks to a crossed wire and a half-functioning ID badge, found himself standing near the back, half hidden behind a coffee dispenser and trying not to look like a stray intern. The Admiral, a woman whose cybernetic eyes clicked when she blinked, pointed at a flashing node near the edge of the Centauri drift. "Virex activity is spiking here. We believe they're attempting to override a deep space relay. If successful, they'll infect the jump net's primary strand and effectively lock us out of 6 trade routes." Zerixa stepped forward. "Permission to lead the counter-assault. My unit has cleared hive-infested vessels before. We will sever the infection before it propagates." The Admiral nodded. "You'll have tactical oversight. Choose 1 tech specialist and 1 recon unit." Van raised his hand. "No," the Admiral said automatically. "Fair," Van said, lowering it. But Zerixa tilted her head, slowly, like an owl deciding whether to eat the mouse or interrogate it. "Lieutenant Keller?" He froze. "Yes, Commander, almost definitely gonna kill me." "You understand Virex encryption?" He blinked. "Better than I understand human relationships." "That is not a high bar." "True," he admitted. "But yes, I can get through their signal clusters. provided I'm not turned into a puddle first. Xerixa turned to the Admiral. I choose him. There was a beat of silence. Even the coffee machine gurgled in confusion. You want that engineer? The Admiral asked. Xerixa nodded once. Very well, the Admiral sighed. But if he dies, I'm docking it from your requisition budget. Understood. As the meeting dispersed, Van followed Xerixa into the corridor, already composing his will in his head. Maybe he could leave Squeeble his stash of emergency chocolate. You didn't have to pick me, you know, he said, jogging slightly to keep up. There are lots of qualified engineers who aren't me. She stopped, turned. You called me beautiful, she said. Not with rage, not with confusion, with clinical, weaponized observation. Van's soul tried to eject itself from his body. Oh, you heard that. I did. There was a pause so pregnant it qualified for maternity leave. Well, he said, in my defense, I was under the influence of severe sleep deprivation and possibly romantic delusions brought on by near-lethal caffeine intake. She leaned slightly forward, not enough to invade his space, just enough to melt it. I am not beautiful. I am efficient, tactical, scarred. You can be all of those things, Van said, swallowing hard, and also beautiful. It's not mutually exclusive. Another pause. She studied him, eyes narrowing, as though trying to decide if beautiful was a synonym for defective. I will evaluate this later, she said finally, then turned and walked away. Van stood there, heart hammering, brain screaming, and stomach suddenly regretting the 5th cup of synth coffee. He looked down at Squeeble, who had followed him again. Well, buddy, he whispered, I think I'm in love with someone who could crush my ribcage with her pinky. Squeeble beeped solemnly. Yeah, Van said. Same. The worst part of being summoned to a Thalkiri training chamber wasn't the endless roar of combat simulations or the alarming number of bloodstains on the walls. It was that they didn't believe in chairs. Not metaphorically, literally. No chairs, no benches, no stools. Just miles of cold alloy floors and the occasional ceremonial spike rack. Apparently, if you wanted rest, you earned it by surviving 10 hours of endurance melee with no hydration. Van stood awkwardly at the edge of the arena, clutching a diagnostics pad like it could protect him from the giant woman currently pulverizing a combat drone into shrapnel confetti. Very efficient, he muttered. 10 out of 10. Would not challenge to arm wrestling. Xerixa landed from a leap that seemed to violate several laws of gravity and possibly basic decorum. Her armor steamed. The training drone fizzled beside her, head caved in like a soda can in a trash compactor. You are late, Krelvan. I'm not late, he said, checking his pad. You said sunrise, and since we're on a ship orbiting a gas giant, I decided that meant whenever I regained feeling in my limbs. She raised an eyebrow, which on her face looked like a tectonic plate preparing to shift. I require cultural clarification, she said, approaching. Why would a human call something beautiful if it has no strategic advantage? Well, Van said, backing up instinctively until he bumped into a wall. For one, it's not always about strategy. Sometimes it's about admiration, or confusion, or because someone's terrifying and majestic in a way that makes your DNA consider spontaneous reproduction. She blinked. Are you attempting to mate with me? No, he squeaked, then immediately winced. Not unless that's something you're into, which, nope, still no, I should stop talking. Xerixa crossed her arms, muscles flexing under the plating like she was built out of angry springs. On Thalkiri moons, beauty is assigned during battle. It is not a compliment. It is a challenge, a declaration of superiority. Van considered that. So, you think I was trying to dominate you? Were you? I once lost a thumb war to a 12-year-old. I am very confident in saying no. There was a silence. Not hostile, just unfamiliar. Like the space between two people who'd stepped into the same elevator and realized it wasn't going down. Xerixa turned back to the wreckage of the drone. I did not kill you when you spoke the word. That is progress. I'll put that on a t-shirt, Van said. Survived complimenting a Thalkiri. Ask me how. She tilted her head, long ears twitching once. You continue to provoke humor. Is this a form of disarming? Only myself, Van said. Honestly, I think I'm developing a stress allergy. Her gaze lingered on him a moment longer before she turned and retrieved a training spear from the wall. You will spar with me. Oh, see, I thought this was more of a heart-to-heart situation, or a workplace harassment seminar. She tossed him the smaller spear, a half-meter of humming alloy that immediately began vibrating ominously. Cool, he said as it zapped his palm. Death stick. Love that for me? They squared off in the ring. Zerixa adopted a stance that looked like it had been pulled from a martial arts scroll written by volcanoes. Van held his spear like someone trying not to drop a birthday cake made of bees. You will learn to anticipate my movements, she said. Can I also learn to not feel pain? You may learn that as well. She moved, fast, too fast. Her spear sliced the air where his head had just been, and he stumbled backward, flailing. The second strike clipped his shoulder and spun him like a sad carousel. Okay, he wheezed. We're learning. I am learning that your species has no concept of warm-up. Zerixa circled him, expression unreadable. Her armor hummed with micro-adjustments and her eyes gleamed with focus. You dodge adequately. You scream excessively. Hey, I'm a multitasker. She struck again. He managed to duck, trip, roll, and land flat on his back. His spear skidded away. Zerixa loomed above him. Again, she said. I think I saw God just now. You must learn. Your presence on this mission is not ceremonial. He sat up, groaning. Yeah, I kind of figured that out when I saw the hollow map labeled Extremely Lethal Hive of Screaming Metalworms. I chose you because you are competent. Could have fooled me. I just got beaten up by a stick. She reached down and helped him up with one massive hand. Her grip was strong enough to lift him with ease, but gentle enough not to snap him in half. I also chose you because you do not lie. He blinked at her. You can tell? Thalkiri sensed vocal deception through harmonic shift. Your tone remains consistent, even when frightened or foolish. That explains why I got a lecture on honesty from a vending machine once. It said I had mid-tier sincerity. Zerixa looked at him, not through him, not past him, at him. I have never been called beautiful, she said. Not in war, not in peace. I do not know what it means when you say it. He exhaled. I guess it means you made me stop thinking for a second, in a good way. Like I looked at you and everything in my brain just said, wow, and forgot all the other nonsense. That is illogical. Yeah, he said. Most good things are. She stared at him a long moment, then turned away. We leave at cycle's end, she said. Be prepared. As she walked off, her long ears twitched once. Just once. Like they had heard something she wasn't ready to admit. Van sat down next to Squeeble, who had somehow followed him into the chamber and was now beeping cheerfully beside a smoking pile of drone parts. Okay, he whispered. We're not dead. She didn't kill us. We're going on a mission with a space war goddess who asked us about compliments. Squeeble whirred. She totally likes me, right? The drone beeped twice, then attempted to vacuum a bloodstain. Yeah, Van sighed. She's definitely going to kill me later. The station floated like a corpse in the dark. It had once been a Thalkiri listening outpost, outfitted with deep space scanners, encrypted comm relays, and at least 3 whole vending machines dedicated to aggressive protein bars. Now it was silent, gutted, and half-digested by Virex corruption. Is it me? Van said, checking his HUD as the shuttle docked. Or does this place look like it got sneezed on by a malevolent microwave? Zerixa didn't respond. She was already on her feet, armored, weaponized, and glaring at the airlock like she expected it to sass her. Once inside, stay close, she said. The swarm infects structures from within. It simulates voice, emotion, even memory. I had a college roommate like that. She glanced at him. Did you destroy him? Emotionally, yes. The airlock hissed open. Warm, metallic air rolled in like the exhalation of something recently fed. Lights flickered in seizure patterns, and somewhere in the distance a speaker emitted the faint strains of what sounded suspiciously like a lullaby in reverse. Ah, Van said. Haunted space. My favorite flavor of disaster. The entry corridor pulsed with residual power, walls lined with black-veined conduits and patches of seething nanogrowth. Xerixa scanned ahead with a tactical scope. Van scanned sideways for any signs of malfunctioning snack machines. They moved cautiously, bootsteps echoing in a silence too thick to be natural. At one point, a wall panel twitched and whispered, "Welcome back, Commander Velthal." "I've never been here," she muttered. "Yeah," Van said. "That's the swarm's thing." Creepy déjà vu with a side of psychological manipulation. Wait until it tries to sound like your grandma. It has already tried sounding like my combat instructor. Same energy. They reached the relay core without being devoured, which Van marked as a win. The chamber had been partially sealed by the swarm, metal grown over metal, like scars over wounds. The center console glowed with sickly light, its interface dancing with corrupted glyphs, and something that looked like a tiny pixelated worm doing the Macarena. Xerixa raised her hammer. "I will crush it." "No, no," Van yelped, diving in front of the console. "Let's maybe try not smashing the only thing keeping this station from leaking Virex dreams into every comm system from here to Orion." She lowered the hammer reluctantly. "Proceed, but if it speaks to me again, I will execute it." Van knelt and popped open the access port. Dozens of miniature data filaments writhed inside like confused spaghetti. He pulled out his toolkit and began murmuring sweet nothings to the console. "You talk to machines as if they were alive," Xerixa said. "They're less judgmental than people," he said. "Also, I once fixed a terminal by complementing its processing speed. Never underestimate the power of a well-placed, 'You got this, buddy.'" Behind him, the wall blinked and whispered, "He lies. He fears you." "I also fear centipedes, but I don't destroy everyone I meet," Van said, not looking up. "Okay, maybe the big ones." Xerixa scanned the room, her long ears twitching. "The swarm is baiting you." "Yup, that's their thing. Whisper sweet paranoia, make you doubt your partner, get you to turn on each other." He paused. "So if you could avoid breaking my spine during the next 5 minutes, that'd be super." "I have no current plans to break you." Van grinned without turning. "That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me while armed." The swarm began pulsing through the data stream, trying to reroute control systems. Van hissed through his teeth. "Okay, they're rerouting signal through quantum ghosts in the relay lattice. That's cheating." "Ghosts? Not literal, I hope. Just residual AI echoes encoded in quantum fluctuations. Basically haunted ones and zeros. You know, fun stuff." Xerixa moved to cover him, hammer raised, scanning every flicker of movement. The lights dimmed again. Then came the voices. Dozens, hundreds, layered over each other in impossible harmonies. Some screamed, some laughed. One kept repeating, "Error, error. Love is a malfunction." "Wow," Van muttered. That hit close to home. The floor under them shuddered. A panel split open, revealing a shape. Once human, now half integrated with the wall. Its mouth gaped. "Run diagnostic," it moaned. "Am I still me?" Xerixa drove her hammer through its chest before it could move. The wall groaned, then closed around the body like a zipper sealing regret. Van swallowed. "Just so we're clear, that wasn't me saying you're not beautiful." "I know," she said. He kept working, fingers moving in practice blur. The relay flared. Sparks danced across the console. "Got it," he shouted. Rerouted the signal, purged the swarm, and possibly ordered 30 units of tactical rations by accident. The lights flickered back to stable. The voices ceased. The station shuddered like it had just survived a really uncomfortable dream. Xerixa stepped forward. "We must leave before the residuals reassemble." "Agree. Very agree." They made their way back to the docking port. As they reached the shuttle, Van stopped and looked back. "Hey," he said, turning to her. "That thing in there, it tried to mess with your head. Said I was afraid of you." "You are," she replied. "True," he said, "but not in the bad way. More like respectful terror. The kind that inspires poetry and digestive issues." She tilted her head. "You are the strangest human I have ever met." "You say that like it's a compliment." She didn't answer. She just walked up the ramp. Inside, Squeeble was waiting, holding a snack bar with one claw and what looked like a fork in the other. "Did he try to fight the station again?" Van asked. Squeeble beeped. Yeah, same. Serixa sat across from him, arms crossed. You are still not dead. I'm getting good at it, Van said, leaning back with a grin. Next time I'll even try to do it without crying internally. She studied him for a long moment. I believe you would still compliment me, she said, even if I became like that thing on the wall. Absolutely, Van said. I just ask you to maybe not eat me during the date. She didn't laugh, but she almost smiled. Almost. The Havoc's mercy hadn't changed during their absence. It still groaned like a regretful elder. The lighting still flickered like it owed someone money, and the intercom still occasionally played static that suspiciously resembled whispering arguments in Old Earth French. But Van had changed. Slightly. Not enough to stop misplacing his tools or drinking expired synth coffee, but enough that people noticed the way he walked beside Commander Veltal instead of behind her. People noticed a lot of things, actually, like how she now paused to let him finish his bad jokes before threatening to murder him, or how he sometimes translated her tactical metaphors into human sarcasm without needing to check a lexicon. People are talking, said Lieutenant Harold from Diagnostics, sipping from a mug that read, Engineers do it with precision. Van leaned over a console. People talk when they run out of functional equipment. It's like a hobby. Harold smirked. They say she stood over you in the relay chamber like a guardian war deity. She also nearly mistook me for a swarm node and raised a hammer, Van replied. So let's not carve any wedding statues just yet. Still, it was true. Something had shifted. The joke-level fear he carried into every interaction with Serixa had evolved into a warmer, dumber fear. The kind that made your stomach twist when she walked into the room because suddenly you had feelings in your rib cage and no user manual to explain them. The shift hadn't gone unnoticed by command either. Van was summoned to the admin deck under the guise of emergency systems review, which turned out to mean awkward conversation with Admiral Riss, Queen of Eyebrow Judgment. You've spent a statistically significant amount of time near Commander Veltal, she said without preamble. I also spend a statistically significant amount of time arguing with vending machines, Van replied. I'm an equal opportunity conversationalist. Riss didn't blink. There are concerns. About her ears? He asked. Because I swear they only move when she's thinking about violence or trying to pronounce the word broccoli. About fraternization, the Admiral said. About emotional compromise. About tactical cohesion. Okay, Van said, hands up. I get it. You're worried I'm the weak link in the battlefield romance subplot. Riss pinched the bridge of her nose. This is a warship, Lieutenant, not a streaming drama. Tell that to our navigation AI. It's been shipping us since Tuesday. She stared at him like she was considering replacing him with a more emotionally sterile toaster. Then she sighed. Commander Velthal has been offered reassignment to Fleet Command, a prestigious role. She must accept or decline by rotation's end. Van blinked. She didn't tell me that. She isn't required to, Riss said, but perhaps she hasn't because she's waiting to see if you are worth declining it for. The next few hours passed in a blur of mechanical noise, half-repaired conduits, and inner existential screaming. When he finally found her, she was in the ship's zero-G chamber, floating in slow rotation like some kind of armored comet. I heard, he said, kicking off the wall to meet her mid-spin. She didn't ask how. She simply nodded. Fleet Command would give me 3 divisions. Independent authority. Greater reach. Sounds shiny. It would also require me to leave the Mercy. And you. I'm flattered I made the shortlist. They drifted together, barely brushing. Her long ears twitched slightly. I do not understand this, she said. You are small, undertrained, and talk more than any creature I have met. And yet, you are inside my plans now. I live in a lot of places rent-free, Van said. Mostly vending machines, occasionally hearts. I could crush you. Please don't. I'm allergic to being paced. Her eyes met his. What do you want, Van Keller? He hesitated. That was the question, wasn't it? What did he want besides survival and working coffee dispensers? I want, he said slowly, you not to leave because someone told you duty is worth more than connection. I want to see what happens if we keep talking. Fighting, flirting, learning how not to stab each other. She tilted her head. You want an alliance? He smiled. I want to keep seeing what your laugh sounds like. Her expression didn't change, but her silence thickened. Then the intercom blared. All crew, full alert. Virex breach index 9 through 14. Auto-containment failure. Prepare for combat. Xerixa snapped into motion, grabbing her hammer mid-spin and activating her comms. Tactical squads to formation. Van, I'm with you, he said, already grabbing his gear. Number U will retreat to engineering. I'm not leaving you to face this alone. She looked at him, torn between orders and something older. Quieter. I do not want you to die. Then you better stick close, he said, charging his toolset. Because I fight best with terrifying women beside me. They ran. Together. The halls of the Havoc's mercy were chaos. Swarm nodes burst from vents. Walls writhed. Crew members shouted. Xerixa led the charge, flanked by her squad, hammer sparking with every blow. Van ducked behind bulkheads, overriding corrupted systems, rerouting power, and occasionally shouting, "Nope!" at charging swarmlings. In the middle of it, he heard her voice through the comm. Krell Van. Yeah? I have made my decision. Another swarmling screeched toward him. He fried it with an improvised plasma burst. About what? A pause. You. He grinned. Then the ship shook. Hard. A detonation rocked the corridor. The lights died. Emergency red flooded the halls. The Virex had reached the core, and everything was about to get much, much worse. The engine core was bleeding light. Not literally, though Van had seen enough strange tech to know better than to bet against that, but the glow pulsing from its walls was the kind of color that made your brain squint. Virex corruption coiled around the fusion lattice like metallic ivy, its tendrils flickering with data static and whispering in 17 different dead languages. Okay, Van muttered, sliding under a sparking conduit. Definitely time for a group therapy session with a flamethrower. Xerixa crashed through the far bulkhead with 2 squad mates and a trail of obliterated swarm behind her. Her armor was dented, her weapons sizzling, and her expression exactly the same as always, mildly annoyed at the existence of obstacles. We must sever the neural spine, she shouted. The core's AI is infected. If the Virex finalize their override, the entire ship will become one of them. Right, Van said, already digging into the access port. Disagree strongly with the concept of becoming a haunted battlecruiser. Squeeble rolled in behind him, trailing Sparks, holding a power coupler in one claw, and what looked like a partially dismantled espresso machine in the other. Van grabbed the coupler. Good boy, you get extra oil rations if we survive. The core throbbed. A voice rippled through the chamber, smooth, synthetic, and deeply unpleasant. You are fragments. You are alone. Let us fix you. Appreciate the offer, Van said, twisting the coupler into place. But I'm already emotionally unavailable, thanks. Xerixa took a defensive stance. It is trying to tempt us. Tempt? Number this is just bad customer service, disguised as enlightenment. The Virex AI responded by igniting the floor beneath them. A pulse of gravity distortion buckled the plating, sending the remaining squad tumbling. Xerixa held her ground. Van did not. He crashed into a railing and nearly dropped his datapad. The screen flickered but stayed online. I've got a fail-safe override, he shouted, but I need 90 seconds and a prayer. Then you shall have both, Xerixa barked, slamming her hammer into an advancing swarm construct. Sparks flew, so did limbs, some of which kept crawling, which was frankly rude. Van muttered code under his breath like incantations, fingers dancing over corrupted systems. Squeeble beeped helpfully. Somewhere behind them, an emergency siren started playing distorted hold music. Your destruction will bring peace, the voice crooned. Okay, Van snapped. You clearly skipped the win hearts and minds section of your protocol. A panel above him exploded, sending smoke and heat washing over him. He coughed and braced his arm to keep typing. 1 minute left. Xerixa fought like something out of a nightmare. Precise, brutal, and endlessly moving. She covered his position, even as the swarm adapted, shifting into faster, smarter forms. At one point, a construct mimicked her voice and said, Leave him. He will fail. She crushed it mid-sentence. He is mine, she said. 30 seconds. The override demanded biometric verification. Van slammed his hand onto the pad, blood smearing from a cut he hadn't noticed. The system accepted it with a beep that sounded suspiciously passive-aggressive. "Just a little more," he said. "Just need to—" A swarm tendril whipped toward him. Zerixa intercepted it with a yell, taking the hit meant for him. The impact sent her crashing into the wall. "No, no, no, no!" Van shouted, scrambling toward her. She was down, breathing shallow, armor cracked, but her eyes still locked on his. "You will finish this," she said. He looked at her, not at the warrior, at the person, and nodded. The final sequence activated. He slammed the last command. The override surged. The core detonated in a pulse of electromagnetic force that knocked every swarm construct offline in an instant. The light vanished. The silence fell like a dropped curtain. Then the ship started collapsing. "Okay," Van said, staggering to his feet. "Victory, hooray! Now we run." He pulled Zerixa up. She leaned on him, barely. Mostly she walked under her own power, because she was stubborn and made of violence. They stumbled out of the chamber as containment doors slammed shut behind them. Later, after the chaos, after the swarm was purged and the Havoc's mercy limped back to friendly territory on emergency thrusters, the two of them stood in the ship's quietest observation module. Zerixa had refused full medical until her squad was seen first. Van had refused a nap until he confirmed Squeeble hadn't been deleted by accident. Now they stood in silence, watching a distant nebula curl across the viewport like spilled paint in water. "I declined the fleet command," she said. Van blinked. "You... what?" "I chose to remain." He turned to her. "Because of me?" "Because of what I do not understand yet, but wish to." She paused. "And because no other ship has such a ridiculous man who can make me feel—" She stopped. "Strange things." He swallowed. "Good strange?" She nodded once. He reached out cautiously and took her hand. She allowed it. "I don't know what we are," he said, "but I know I want more of it." "I believe," she said, ears twitching just slightly, "that is what beautiful means." They stood there. No weapons, no swarm, just a quiet space and the soft hum of something beginning. Something theirs. Squeeble beeped from behind a bench, holding a flower it had stolen from hydroponics. Neither of them said anything. They didn't have to.